Welcome back to really the culmination of this whole week. So for those of you guys who have been here with us from the very start, welcome. This is going to be a great way for you guys to really put together all of the skills that you picked up over this week, whether it be using patterns, predicting, outlining, what have you. This is the place where it all comes together. And for those of you guys who are joining us for the first time, something you can expect from this class, something you can expect from the next 2 hours is you are 100% going to walk away feeling just a little bit, maybe a lot more confident in your MCAT skills and abilities than you did when you joined us. So again, welcome all of you. Shout out to Grey's Anatomy, which won the poll by like a hair. House coming in second. I'll give you guys a little secret. When I was prepping for the MCAT, I used to spend my study breaks watching House because the nerd in me felt like I was still studying. I still felt medical and like a good student. And so I used to try and trick myself by saying even when I wasn't studying, I was, which totally isn't true. But the cool thing is now, looking back on it, now that I've done preclinical years, it's really cool because they talk about tests and stuff, and I know what they're talking about. So before we go on, just a little introduction. My name is Ashwarya. Some of you guys might have seen me in the public chat during different points of the week. I am a second-year medical student at Yale, about to be a third year, which is just crazy. But I'm really happy to be here with you guys today. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have for me. And I'm happy to put you through this boot camp. I've always wondered what those people like in exercise boot camps feel like, the ones that are yelling at you. And so I'm excited to feel the academic version of that. So we've covered our welcome and introduction, and we're going to talk a little bit about the MCAT for those of you guys who are new today or are new to the MCAT in general. We're going to talk a little bit about strategy and content, which means that we're going to go through some of those really hard or high-level MCAT questions where you guys can show me your skills. And then we're just gonna talk. So whatever questions you might have for me, I'm more than happy to answer. And yeah, like Candace is saying, this is a happy, supportive boot camp. I won't be yelling at you. Worst comes to worst, I might get a little excited and get a little hand crazy, but that's about it. Awesome. So for those of you guys who are new, the MCAT is really important in terms of your application. For those of you guys who've been here for a while, here it is represented for you in this beautiful image. And so your MCAT score is, other than your GPA, it's the thing that gets you in the door. Because a lot of schools will sort by MCAT and GPA score. So you want to make sure that you are falling at the very least in the range of scores that are accepted by your school. But if you have a lower GPA, your GPA is on the lower end because of, some mistakes you made freshman year, you took that class that maybe you shouldn't have taken, then your MCAT score is the #1 thing that can help you account for that. Also, hi Ash! My nickname is also Ash. This is cool. But your MCAT score is the thing that can make or break your application. Because if you have a lower GPA, but you get an MCAT score that's like 80th, 85th, 90th percentile, then what you're telling schools is like, yeah, okay, I made a mistake. People make mistakes, but I was able to do what I needed to do to get to the place that you want me to be. I was able to do the things to show you that I can be a good doctor, I can have the skills you're looking for. So it's definitely a really important thing. You want to make sure that you are falling in the range of the schools that you're interested in. If you haven't even looked at that, it's a good place to start to figure out what your goal score should be. And from there, you really want to be doing everything you can to get that high MCAT score. Because it doesn't really work the other way, right? Like if you have a high GPA but a low MCAT score, your GPA isn't really going to balance out your MCAT score. Because a lot of schools grade differently, and the medical schools you're applying to don't necessarily know whether your undergraduate institution was like an easy grading school, a hard grading school. They might check out your major, but they're not really going to put that much weight into it or try to figure out any of that stuff. And so your MCAT score is the thing that standardizes you for everyone. So it's the thing that you want to be putting a lot of effort into. And like Candace is saying, the MSAR is a really good resource for that because it gives you the GPA range and the MCAT range, and it also tells you what prereqs are required for the school. It also tells you what their recommendation or like what they require for recommendation letters, because some schools are just like send us 3. Other schools are like, we want 2 from a science professor, 1 from a non-science professor, etc. and so forth. So like Candace said, MSAR is a great resource to check out for that. And so the other thing I'm going to point out before we go on is that we have a drawing. You can see the link up at the top for a $50 Amazon gift card. So if you haven't entered already, go ahead and enter, and we'll be drawing that at the end, which is very exciting. So the next one I want to show you is kind of a, it kind of drives home, well, the slide after this, I suppose. So in addition to the fact that, like, yeah, your MCAT score really, really matters, you want to look at the fact that more students are applying to med school each year, and that's taking into account that DO schools are also becoming more popular. And so keeping in mind that you are going against harder and harder competition, it's not necessarily good enough to be at the bottom end of the score ranges for the schools you're applying to, right? And you want to be aiming for that higher end, because those are the people they're considering. But in terms of people who are matriculating, remember that only 40% of the people who are going to apply each cycle are accepted. And you want to be in that 40%. And the fact that you're here, the fact that you've been joining us this week, kind of means that you're probably there, or you're probably likely to be there, because you're clearly the students who are putting in the work, which is fabulous. But it is super important to know that just getting that base or the lowest score for the school you're interested in doesn't guarantee you acceptance. And your GPA in combination with that MCAT score can really affect that as well. And so this is what I wanted to show you guys. This is what I was excited about. So this is a really great chart to look at to see what are your odds of acceptance given your GPA. What MCAT score would you need to increase your odds of acceptance? So if you are interested in keeping this, because I think it's a great thing to have on hand just to like double check where you need to be, go ahead and take a screenshot of it. But you'll notice that even if you're kind of in this, like I got a 3.0 to a 3.19, if you are scoring in that, you know, roughly 80th, 85th percentile, your chances of getting into medical school go up significantly, right? Like you go from a 13% chance if you are in the 50th percentile to a 44% or 52% chance if you're 80th, 85th or above. So it's a good thing to keep in mind that, one, don't lose hope. Whatever your GPA is, it is still possible for you to get in. It might be harder, and you might have to do more work, but it is definitely possible, because there are a lot of reasons why your GPA might be low, right? That don't necessarily mean you're a bad student. And I'll be honest, my GPA personally was on the lower end of the schools that I was applying to. But my MCAT score really did balance it out, and I'm pretty sure that's what got my foot in the door. That's what got them to read my application and send me interviews. Oh, Ash, I'm happy. I'm happy I can help. Awesome. And so we're about to start our boot camp. We're about to start all the fun science stuff. Are you guys excited? Because I really am. And I'm hoping you guys are excited. I know it's Saturday afternoon, lazy Saturday, but I'm hoping you guys are awake. And if not, take this moment, get in your headspace, get pumped, get awake, because we are starting now. All right, so the goals of today are to use the answers to identify the concepts being tested. Like we talked about earlier this week, the MCAT really likes to make things seem more complicated than they are. And so instead of doing a ton of work, instead of trying to work through a question if you don't have to, one of the best things you can do is glance at the answer choices, see, okay, what is actually being tested in this question, and then go from there. So you don't want to read through the answer choices necessarily. You don't want to let them guide you, but you do want to see if there are keywords popping up in each answer choice. If it's a math or if it's a physics question, you want to see if the answer choices look like you need to do math or not. And things like that are really going to save you a lot of time on test day, if you're not necessarily working through and finding that the answer you found isn't the answer to the question being asked. And again, look for patterns, look to see if there are commonalities in the answer choices that can help you eliminate things. Figure out how much detail is required. Again, do you really need to do all the math for this question, or is setting up the equation enough? and attacking problems, even if you're unsure about the science content, diving in, using what you do know to hopefully eliminate one or two answer choices, even if you can't get to the right answer choice, and then using your strategic guessing skills from there. And finally, employing the right strategy. This is the thing that's going to save you a ton of time on test day. Because a lot of you guys know the content, or at one point have learned the content. And so for a lot of students, moving up points or moving up percentiles isn't so much about content, although that helps a little bit. It's more so about strategy. Using the right skills for each question, approaching each one the right way, identifying how they're going to be presenting wrong answers to you. Those are the things that are really going to get you those extra points come test day. And like Candace is saying, yeah, you're totally going to see things on the MCAT you haven't studied before. And that's fine. That's very, very normal, right? Because even come med school, you're going to see a lot of patients with symptoms that you don't know about. And you're not going to turn that patient away, right? You're not going to say, yeah, sorry, that wasn't in my textbook, that wasn't in my board exam, so like you got to go. No, you're going to take the information that they give you, you're going to go and you're going to do your research, you're going to use your critical thinking skills to kind of cross out what it can't be, and you're going to go from there. So it's a very, very similar approach to the MCAT. And I bet you guys were like, why am I taking the MCAT? It doesn't prepare me for med school in any way, but it does. It really does. All right, so that brings us to our first question. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to open a poll. And I want you guys to pull in, tell me what you think. All right, I'm seeing some changes. All right, so we have the majority of y'all voting for answer choice C, followed by D, followed by B, followed by A. So we have some disagreement in the polls, and that's totally okay, because this is one of those questions where you're getting a few different pieces of information, right? You're being told that the bond between the two phosphate groups in ATP is this number, and then you're asked how much would the electrical potential energy change if the bond were 3 times shorter. So my question to you is, this seems like a math problem. Do we actually have to do math on this question? Is it required? Because I promise you, most students come to this question, they read through, they see that number, they see that exponent, their math brains turn on, and they're ready to go. But then you check out those answer choices like we told you earlier, right? Because again, you don't want to be led by the answer choices, you don't want to let them bias your thinking, but in this case, we're noticing in our answer choices we get increase versus decrease, and we get 3 times versus 9 times. So it doesn't really seem like we have to work out any math. It doesn't seem like we have to do any calculations. In fact, that seems like it would be a pretty big waste of time, right? But a lot of students are going to do it anyway, because they're not going to look at those answer choices. They're going to just approach this question step by step. They're going to approach it linearly, and they're going to waste that time on test day. Yeah, exactly. Astrid and Camilla and Nick, we are not those students. We are not going to be doing math because we're approaching this as logically and as hashtag no math MCAT as we can. So in this case, the first thing we want to do is figure out, okay, what equation do we really need in this case? We're talking about electric potential energy. And I know this is one of those cases where a lot of you guys probably confuse electric potential energy with force all the time because those equations are so similar. And the one thing I would say about that is force makes me think of the force of gravity. And our equation for force of gravity is gmm over r squared. And so it's super similar to our equation for force here, right? where force would be KQQ over R squared. So that's something that helps keep that in mind, that force will have R squared in the bottom because it's similar to our gravitational force equation, whereas electric potential energy will only have one R in the bottom. And another way to think about that is, you guys, I'm sure, know your work equation, where work equals force times distance, and we measure work in terms of joules, which is the same unit for energy. And so in this case, we could say that our electric potential energy is equal to the electric force times distance, because that's how we get rid of that distance variable in the denominator. And we go from R squared to R. And so I know that that's something that a lot of people get caught up on, get tripped up on, and I think it's really helpful to remember the relationships more so than just the equations, in order to remember which equation goes with which, goes with force versus potential energy. So since we now know that our potential energy equation is KQQ over R, what are we doing here in terms of changing that bond length? We're not affecting the K, we're not affecting either of the charge values, we're affecting that radius, right? And so if we plug in, we say our radius is now going to be 1/3 R instead of R, we go ahead, we solve that out, we get 3KQQ over R, which means that our new bond length, our new electric potential energy is going to increase by 3 times. And I know when we started this question, I didn't give you guys that much time to actually work it out, and I did that on purpose because you don't need that much time for this question. Because yes, there is an average amount of time that questions are going to take you, but questions like this should be taking you less time, allowing you to move through the test faster so that when you do come across harder questions, you have the time left over for them. And for those of you guys who are here, we might have briefly talked about triaging. And the idea behind triaging is you don't necessarily want to do questions in order, because this test doesn't lend itself to that. And so you want to be doing the easier questions first, doing the questions that take you less time first. And I know that might sound kind of weird right now. It's something that we talk about a lot in our courses, and we practice how to triage effectively. Because like most skills, you know, unless you practice it, unless you're good at it, it's not really going to help you. But that is something we put a lot of emphasis in, because doing questions like this first on test day, one, means that you're way ahead on time, and two, it means that you're boosting your confidence, right? Like going through a question like this, just being like, oh yeah, I got this question right, is definitely a great confidence boost as you're going into other harder questions. Whereas starting off with a hard question, not really knowing how to do it, is kind of a morale dampener. And it makes you wonder, like, okay, am I really going to be okay on these other questions, or is this just a really hard test that I'm not prepared for? You don't want to put yourself in that situation. You want to put yourself in as positive of an environment as possible. And like Deborah was saying, each question is worth the same. So doing the easy questions first is 100% the best strategy you can use. And unlike maybe the SAT, there's no penalty for guessing, so definitely answer everything. Awesome, so let's move on to a biochem question. So this one, again, I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds to pull in, and then we'll chat. All right, so in this case, we have our sodium-potassium pump knowledge is kind of being called into question, kind of not, because they're telling us what it actually is. So what we're really talking about in this case is, so it's definitely biochem. It's asking us, if we put a cell in a new environment, what's going to happen? So the first thing we want to know is what? what is the first thing we need to answer this question? Because our answer choices are increase, decrease, then decrease, or stay the same. So we're kind of covering all of our different answer choices. But feel free, for any of these questions I'm asking, feel free to throw an answer into the public chat. One thing I'll say is that I think these lessons are fabulous. I think that we cover a lot of great content, we cover a lot of great strategy, but the way that you're gonna really get the most out of it is by chatting in. By publicly verbalizing your opinions, your feelings. And I get that it's kind of scary to be wrong, especially in front of everyone else. But frankly, everyone's wrong sometime, and it's okay. That's how we learn. Cool, Sierra. Thank you. Thank you for leading the charge. I appreciate that. But yeah, totally, Abby. We need to know what happens to a cell in a hypotonic solution. And so what do we know about hypotonic solutions? I'm going to say that this is one of those things that I have a hard time defining and an easier time drawing out. So that's what I did for this question. So I said, okay, I have my cell. It has all of these particles in it. And now I'm putting it in this environment that has like 3 ions, right? So we're going from a regular thing where we have equilibrium with our cell in the external environment, and we're going to an environment that doesn't have as many particles outside. It has a lower osmolarity. So what happens in this case? What does our cell want to do to return to equilibrium? Is it going to want to take more ions in, or is it going to want to send some of those ions out? And yeah, totally, Nick. Hypotonic, you have more, yeah, totally, Katie. There's less stuff outside than inside. Yes, Allie, yes. So ions are going to exit the cell so that water can then, right, so our ions are going to start, our ions are going to be mass exodusing this cell. So that way we can restore, that equilibrium. And so to send those ions out, how does that potassium pump come into play? Is it going to increase its action or decrease? Yeah, exactly. Candace posted a great summary. If our ions are trying to move out of the cell because it's hypotonic, then that's going to increase our pump activity. Yep. And I want to point something out because I know a lot of you guys chose, well, a few of you guys chose answer choice C. And I know that you're probably wondering, okay, fine, I said increase and then I said it would decrease. So why isn't it C? And the thing I want to point out is that our question stem asks immediately, right? It's saying what would happen immediately after the cell is moved. So sure, eventually once that cell reaches equilibrium, that pump is going to be, the pump is going to be less active, your ATP consumption is going to decrease, but because our question stem specifically says immediately, we choose answer choice A because that is the first thing that would happen. And that is a really, really common trick that they'll try to use. They'll try to get you on the fact that you know it has to increase, you know that eventually once you reach equilibrium, your ATP consumption is going to decrease, and they try to get you on that with keywords like this for people who are reading a little bit too quickly. So what do you guys think? Was this a hard question necessarily? Would you rank this as a question that like now you would be scared to do come test day? Because I'm not going to lie, when I look at this question, when I come across it, I'm like, there's a lot of words going on. And it seems confusing because, yeah, totally, Camilla, totally. It's okay though, right? A lot of people are missing that key word, but you guys are here today, and this is your reminder to keep track of those keywords. Yeah, it's not hard, it's just tricky. Like, you guys know the information, you know the content, but the thing that would probably lead you to miss this question is the MCAT-ishness of it, right? Like, this is where strategies come in handy. This is where reading carefully and training yourself to do that, developing that skill is really, really important. Yes, and that's the other thing, Abby. A lot of people doing this question the first time think, okay, I know my ions are going to flow out, and so water is going to follow. My cell is going to shrivel, things like that. They focus more on the water rather than the ions, even though the question stem is telling you about ions specifically. That's a very, very common approach to this question, common wrong approach to this question. Yeah. So sometimes the MCAT is trying to trick you by giving you the fluff in the beginning. Sometimes they're trying to help you as well, for sure. Cool. So what we're going to do now is talk about a science passage. So I'm going to give you guys about 3 minutes. I know that's a little rough, but I'm going to give you 3 minutes to read this passage, and then we're going to come back together and we're going to talk about it, okay? So I want you to keep track of what's going on in each paragraph, because I'm going to ask you to outline with me when we return. So keeping that in mind, good luck, and here we go. All right, welcome back, everyone. Go ahead and tell me in the public chat how you felt about this passage. Was it a good one? Were you interested? Did the time go by too quickly? Like, I just want to know your feedback. I want to know where you guys are at. Because I'll say, you know, I personally like this passage. I think neuro stuff in general is just really, really cool. I started out when I got to med school thinking like, oh, I want to be a neurologist. That changed it a little bit. I am now like pro anesthesia, but an important thing in terms of like reading passages is trying to find something interesting. I get not every passage is is going to be fun. But finding something that can keep you engaged in the passage is really, really important. Oh, yay! And I love it. I love that you guys are saying interesting. I love that Catherine is saying time went quickly. Jesse's saying plenty of time. And that's pretty common, right? It's always good to know that even though you personally might think a passage is easy, might think a passage is hard, the people around you might be thinking something different. And so never really think that like, oh, I can't do this passage, or oh, I'm messing up here, because you're an individual person, you're an individual test taker. Some things are going to be easier, some things are going to be harder, and that's just how it is. I know, like for me, orgo passages, those are always my skip and come back to passages, even if they were really, really easy. Yes, and Ash is kind of beating us to it. I want to outline this passage too. So let's see, I'm going to put this in the, well, okay, I'm going to type it out into the upper right corner. What do you guys think paragraph 1 is about? Because we at Kaplan are huge on outlining. We think that outlining is a good way to stay focused, because instead of just passively trying to get to the end of a passage, you're focusing paragraph by paragraph and trying to figure out what is this paragraph telling me. And so we are super pro outlining, and I'm going to talk you guys through it a little bit. So paragraph 1, if I asked you for like the Twitter version of this, or if I asked you for a 3 to 5 word summary, what would you guys tell me this paragraph is about? Because I know what I'd say. And again, we're going to outline, but I'm also going to say that my outline can be very different from your outline. It's really just about what helps you keep track of what's going on in the passage. Yeah, so honestly, the thing that I think I'm probably going to use this passage for is the fact that we're talking about myasthenia gravis, and we're talking about treatment for it. And so everything else, like, yeah, we're learning about muscles, we're learning about pathological conditions, but most of the testable information in this specific paragraph is going to come from the information they give us about myasthenia gravis. Because that gives them a chance to ask us questions about the thymus, it gives them a chance to ask us questions about the neuromuscular junction. So that's really where the testable information is going to come. So when you write that outline, yes, you want to summarize the paragraph, but you want to also be summarizing with a focus on what can be testable. So that way, when you are doing your questions, you know where to come back in the passage. Cool. What about paragraph 2? This one's a little bit of a shorter one. But what's worth noting in paragraph 2? What's the thing that's going to help us in paragraph 2 if we need to come back to it? And I like what Ash had said earlier, too. That paragraph 2 is mainly, we're talking about Lambert-Eaton syndrome. So that's what I'm really going to throw in here, that it's about Lambert-Eaton syndrome. And yeah, I can totally put in something about calcium, just because that seems like something they might test us on. It's a unique aspect. But again, I'm trying to make sure that I don't really make my outline too long. I don't want to spend too much time on it. It's just a guide for when I get to questions. So yeah, nice. I love these. Lambert-Eaton syndrome, antibodies attack, pre-synapse, calcium, perfect. Cool. And I like that, you know, the small cell lung cancer is interesting. If you want to include it in your outline, that's totally up to you. If not, also cool. I think the main takeaway here is definitely that we're talking about Lambert-Eaton syndrome. So we're not going to go to paragraph 1 if we have a question on Lambert-Eaton syndrome, right? Cool. And Katie, I like that you're getting all the main points, but typically, since we're trying not to spend too much time on the outline, you kind of want to, again, think Twitter, think like 3 to 5 words, 7 if needed. But at the end of the day, your outline is here to help you. So if that's the thing that's going to help you, if that's the thing that's going to keep you from rereading the passage, and it's going to help you just focus in on this paragraph specifically, then cool. That is really the goal of this outline, to keep you from rereading the passage for every question. All right, cool. And then finally we come to paragraph 3. So again, tell me in the chat, what would you outline paragraph 3 as? Because what I'm seeing is that we're talking about ways to make a differential diagnosis. We're going to give a drug that inhibits acetylcholinesterase. We're going to we're going to perform repetitive nerve stimulation and look at the muscle response. Yeah, so paragraph 3, I would say we're talking about how to diagnose MG versus LE, right? Because now I know that if I get a question on diagnosing either of these, I'm not going to paragraph 1 and 2. I'm going to paragraph 3. That's where I get my information. Yeah, totally. Myasthenia versus Lambert, differences found via these two things. Oh, Mike, I 100% write this down. This is going on my scratch paper for sure, because this is what I'm going to look at when I get to my questions to see, 1, do I even need to go back to the passage? 2, if I do, where in the passage do I need to go? Yeah, so for the purposes of today, I'm just writing it on our slide specifically, but this is definitely a thing you want on your outline, or on your scratch paper. And then we also get this image, which is the results of the repetitive nerve stimulation. Anytime you get an image, you want to outline it too, even if it's just to repeat what the figure description is saying, just so that you have a better idea of it. For things like graphs or charts, it's good to note down any major results or any major outliers, things like that, or major trends. So for this, best way to outline it, in my opinion, is really just, we do figure 1, results of RNS. It's not really telling us anything beyond that. If we need to figure out why there are differences between these 3 images, we'll get a question on it. We'll come back to it then. For right now, we're not wasting time on it. We are ready to jump to the questions. Give me like a smiley face in the public chat if you're excited for our questions, because I am. This is a passage I really, really like. It's a topic I really, really like. So our first one is, why does the administration of a medication that inhibits acetylcholinesterase improve the symptoms of myasthenia gravis? So I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds to pull in, and then we'll talk. All right, so we have about 75 of you pulled in, which is pretty great in terms of figuring out where we're at. So most of you guys are voting, about half of you are voting B, then 20% of you are voting A and C. So first thing I'm going to ask you is, do we need the passage for this question? Because we get that administration of a medication that inhibits it, improving symptoms of myasthenia gravis. I'm not going to lie, at this point, I don't completely remember what caused myasthenia gravis, so I would probably go back just to make sure that I remember like what the cause is. If you do remember that, then that's totally great. No need to do it. Definitely looking at the answer choices helps you make that decision though, because like you guys are saying, it is pseudo-discrete. You're trying to figure out, okay, what does acetylcholinesterase do? What would this medication do to it? And yeah, so we see that acetylcholinesterase, if you guys remember it, again, throw it in the chat. What is the role of acetylcholinesterase? Definitely a big thing giving it away is we get the acetylcholine, probably has to do with that. We have the ACE, so it's an enzyme. And so acetylcholinesterase is the thing that that breaks down acetylcholine in our synaptic junction, right? So if we are, yeah, totally, Jesse, totally. So if we are inhibiting acetylcholinesterase, if we're not breaking down ACH, then that means that we have a ton more ACH floating around in the synapse. And so in that case, yeah, that definitely points towards answer choice B, because we're talking about increasing acetylcholine concentration at the synapse. And we know that it doesn't have anything to do with A, because acetylcholinesterase doesn't have to do with those antibodies. We know that it isn't C, because increasing or not inhibiting acetylcholinesterase would decrease that acetylcholine quantity. So C is the opposite. We know it's not C from the get-go. We know that, again, it doesn't have anything to do with calcium, so we could totally pick answer choice B and move on. But if you're in the case of, I don't remember what acetylcholinesterase does, going back to the passage, again, can be really, really helpful. Because going back to the passage is a great way to eliminate answer choice D, since we know that D is more related to Lambert-Eaton syndrome rather than to myasthenia gravis. Using our patterns, we see that increases concentration of acetylcholine versus decreases quantity of acetylcholine, which is something that, again, should be making your brain go, well, they're talking about this twice as compared to the other things, so that means that there's probably a reason for that concentration of acetylcholine probably has something to do with it. And so these are great ways to work through this question. If you needed to go back to the passage based on your outline, what paragraph do you think you'd go to first? Because looking back at our outline, I'm thinking paragraph 1 was what we had established as myasthenia gravis. Instead of reading through the entire passage, I'm going to focus in on that one just to figure out if it tells me anything about acetylcholinesterase and myasthenia gravis. So it's a great way to use your outline. All right, I'm going to give you guys another 30 seconds to read and work through this question, and I'll see you guys then. All right, so again, we have about over half of you guys pulled in. Most of you guys are voting answer choice D. We have a couple of you in A and C land. So awesome. And one thing I want to point out before we move on with respect to the previous question is that it gave us a lot of information, but at the end of the day, like you guys said, the real question it was asking is, what is the role of acetylcholinesterase? If you can answer that question, you can answer the MCAT question itself. And so even though some questions might seem really complicated, even though they seem really, really intense, figure out what is actually being asked. Figure out what the real question that they're testing you on is, and go from there. Because most questions are way less complex than they seem once you break them down. So here we have a researcher is trying to study a new drug. Which of the following control groups provides the most accurate information about this new drug? And so given that our new drug is targeting myasthenia gravis, studying it on people without myasthenia gravis probably not going to give you results, or at the very least, even though it'll give you results, you're not going to be able to apply it to the population of patients with myasthenia gravis, right? You'd only be able to apply that to a population with normal nerve conduction from the get-go. So that doesn't necessarily help us in terms of determining if it's effective for treating the syndrome. We don't really care about people with Lambert-Eaton syndrome right now because, again, we're focused on myasthenia gravis, and so that really brings us down to answer choices C and D. And the reason we wouldn't want the reason we wouldn't want to test on patients who are already being treated with another drug is because that other drug is this. What kind of variable would C be what kind of variable would that other drug be in terms of our results if we went with the population or the sample of answer choice C? I know I'm phrasing this question kind of strangely, but yeah, yes. Oh, I love this. Thank you, Ash and Astrid. I was going for confounding. Thank you, Kami and Camilla. Yeah, so that other drug is a confounding variable. Then you start to wonder, okay, were our results from this other drug just doing its thing, or were our results from our drug? And then does this other drug plus our drug have even better effects or even worse effects? It brings out brings on a lot more questions. And so you want to avoid any kind of experimental setup that offers itself to confounding variables like that. Yeah, so totally. In this case, you would want to be using people with myasthenia gravis who have not been treated with another drug as your control group, because that really allows you to study the effects that your drug is having compared to people who aren't getting any form of treatment. Awesome job, y'all. Awesome, awesome job. And again, real fast, was this a question where we needed to go back to the passage? Because sure, it references myasthenia gravis, which was in the passage, but like, did we actually need to spend the time to read through that passage again? I don't think so. Nope. Nope. But again, a lot of people would. A lot of people read this question, they jump back to the passage to see if there's information there that they can use, and that wastes them time. So this is a good way to save time on test day. Number 1, read the question. 2, figure out what is the question asking me. 3, do I need to go back to the passage, or can I solve this without doing that? 4, carry out whatever plan you have to solve it. Totally. Yeah, it's clinical skills background knowledge, for sure. All right. Again, I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to solve this, and then we'll discuss. And once you pull in, let me know in the chat, did you need the passage to answer this question? Awesome, I love it. I'm seeing a lot of nopes, because you don't, right? We're told Lambert-Eaton, we have antibodies attacking calcium channels, causing muscle weakness. What causes this weakness? So talk to me about that. What do you guys know about calcium channels and muscle weakness and presynaptic cells? What do our calcium channels do? Why are they important? If we release calcium in the cell, what does that mean happens next? Because it's all our series of steps, right? And I guess the first question to ask is, okay, what do calcium channels do? What causes them to become active? And so this is really, yeah, totally Sana and Ali. This is where we bring in that action potential knowledge. This is where we're bringing in that outside knowledge. And so when our action potential reaches the end of the axon, it triggers the calcium channels to open. The influx of calcium then triggers our neurotransmitter vesicles to bind and be released into the synapse. So at the end of the day, the question is saying, what do calcium channels do? Are they important? They're important for neurotransmitter release. So if we are attacking our calcium channels, if we are decreasing the number of calcium channels we have, what's going to happen? Our neurotransmitters aren't going to be released. So we've worked through it. We have that great prediction of what the answer is. We look at our answer choices, and lo and behold, we have that as one of our answer choices, right? Neurotransmitter release is reduced. And that's awesome. That's how you want to be approaching these questions. Yeah, Mackenzie is right. You guys are fire on this. And it's not necessarily about knowing or not knowing the content. That's not necessarily what might be holding you back as a test taker. It's really about working through these questions so that you're not spending a lot of time, so that you're not falling into traps and things like that. But again, we know action potential conduction isn't slowed because our action potential conduction happens before calcium channels come into play. We know that the acetylcholine not binding to receptors is them trying to trick you by pulling in some myasthenia gravis stuff, because you might read Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome, think that translates to myasthenia gravis, go from there. And D is a very commonly chosen wrong answer because it mentions calcium, it mentions inhibition of calcium. But the difference here between our right answer and our wrong answer is that it's not efflux. Our calcium isn't leaving the cell. It's the influx of calcium into that terminal that then causes our neurotransmitter release. And that is what you want to keep in mind. And so predicting is such a good way to avoid yourself from falling into trap answers like D, to avoid yourself from trying to move really, really fast, seeing the word calcium inhibited, picking it and moving on. And it's a great way not to let yourself get tricked, like Deborah's saying, by nice sounding answer choices. Awesome. So we have one more for this one. It's a fun one. I told you that we're not going to pay attention to figures unless the question asks us about it. And so in this case, question asks us about it. So we're gonna chat about it. So go ahead and poll in, and I'll see you guys soon. Okay. So about 79% of you guys are voting B, and then we have about 10% for A and C as well. All right, so our question is asking us, which of the following is a possible interpretation of the repetitive nerve stimulation studies in Figure 1? So I ask you again, is this a go back to the passage or just dive right in question? And I ask this because I'm actually very curious to know how many of you went back to the passage for this question. Because this question, I think, is one of those unique cases where you would. And I'm going to show you why I say that. Because I say that because the first time I did this question, I was really confused until I looked back at the question stem and realized what it was asking, or not the question stem, sorry, the passage, and realized what it was telling me about repetitive nerve stimulation. So how many of you guys, where is this repetitive, or rather, what are we measuring in terms of the images we get? Are we looking at nerves firing, or are we looking at, what are we looking at? That's really my question. I'm going to jump us back to passage really fast. Muscle weakness. Yeah, totally, Sana. So the thing that I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to be honest, I missed this the first time around because I was like trying to figure it out without the passage and getting really confused. Yeah, so the thing that I didn't remember, the thing that you guys seem to have caught though, is that the RNS is measuring the response of the muscle. And that's a really, really important thing to keep in mind, that we're not necessarily looking at nerves firing, although we are indirectly, but we're specifically measuring the response of that muscle. So if you are confused, if you were like, I'm not sure what's going on, then that is a question where I think it might be worth jumping back just to make sure you understand what the figure is trying to tell you. And again, I say this to say that we technically could have done all 4 of these questions without going back to the passage, but question 1, question 4, if you were confused, if you wanted a little bit more guidance, the passage does offer that. So there's no shame in going back to the passage, but it is possible to work through passages a lot faster this way. So with all of that being said, we now know that these are giving us results of muscles. So as compared to normal, what do we notice about the myasthenia gravis muscles? What happens to muscle response with repeat stimulation? Because like I'm looking at it, that's a pretty sad looking photo, right? It's just, woo! You would say that that muscle response is decreasing over time. Yeah, it looks like it's just stopping. What about Lambert-Eaton? Does anything happen to the muscle response with repetitive nerve stimulation? Chrissy, that's awesome. That's totally, totally cool. And I'm happy that that worked, for sure. Yeah, you can look at this picture. You can say, okay, normal is not changing. Lambert-Eaton is not changing. Myasthenia gravis is getting kind of sad. So yeah, totally using deduction is a great approach to this as well. Okay, so you guys have told me that, yeah, Lambert-Eaton, it's not changing that much. If anything, it might be getting stronger. But we have our 2 predictions, right? We know what happens to myasthenia gravis. We know what happens to Lambert-Eaton. We know our answer choice has to match one of those. So answer choice A, people with Lambert-Eaton experience increasing weakness. Nope. People with myasthenia gravis experience increasing weakness. Yeah, that seems possible. Seems legit. People with myasthenia gravis experience decreasing weakness. Nope. If anything, that's what you guys told me would possibly be an answer choice for Lambert-Eaton. So we get rid of C. D, people with Lambert-Eaton experience slower nerve conduction than people with myasthenia gravis. We don't really know because we're measuring in the muscle. So who knows? And if anything, it looks like our nerve stimulation is happening more frequently than the normal state. Yeah, totally. So we pick answer choice B because we know what our figure is telling us, and we move on. So what do you guys think about that passage? Was that a smiley face passage or a sad face passage? And also curious, how long do you think that would take you on test day, knowing that you don't really have to go back to the passage for any of these questions, really? And I'll say that for most MCAT passages, you will go back to the passage, maybe for 1 or 2 questions, but a lot of them require less passage searching than you initially would think. I know the first time around, Most people don't even realize that there are pseudo-discrete questions, that they're a thing. For those of you guys who are new, pseudo-discrete questions are questions that are found in the passages or passage-based question sections, but don't actually require the passage. So basically what we just did. But yeah, so this is definitely one of those things that's a shorter passage. It should be taking you maybe 5-6 minutes as opposed to like the 8 minutes that you would assign for other passages. And so this is a passage you'd want to do first. Get it over with so that way you have that extra time on test day for those harder passages or those orgo passages that you come across. Totally. And yeah, Nas, I agree, right? The questions themselves, really, really easy. Questions themselves are testing content you probably learned like first semester, second semester bio. But all the words make it intimidating, and that's on purpose because the MCAT knows that all of the words make it intimidating. So do what we did. Instead of trying to answer the question as it's written, reinterpret it and ask yourself, okay, what is it actually asking me? Because in this case, our question is saying, yeah, which of the following is a possible interpretation of repetitive nerve stimulation studies, yada, yada, yada. What the question is really asking us is like, what is the difference between myasthenia gravis and our normal, or what is the difference between Lambert-Eaton and our normal? It's just saying, look at the pictures, tell me what's different. It's like the Find the Differences games in those highlights magazines, if anyone knows what I'm talking about. And yeah, Katie, just because it's a long passage doesn't mean it's hard. So when you look at a passage, yes, 100% evaluate for, is this a short passage or a long passage? But like, look at the topic and ask yourself, is this a topic that I'm interested in? Look at the words and ask yourself, okay, is this easy word choice? Is this hard word choice? Are there a lot of big words? And go from there in terms of figuring out how or whether to do passage now or later. Sana, you want to aim to spend about 8 minutes total on the passage and answering questions. Generally, that breaks down to like 3 minutes on the passage, so that way you can have 1 minute per question, because there's usually 5 questions per passage. So that's a good thing to keep in mind as you go through. And yeah, Maria, you can skip passages on the MCAT to do other questions first and come back. So like there's like a review kind of button that you can click on, and so you can mark questions as you go through. So if you come to a math question and you're like, ew, no, I don't want to do this now, you can 100% like guess an answer, mark it, and that way when you review later, it'll show up as a flagged question, and you can go from there. And I'm going to put this out there for those of you guys who maybe haven't done this or weren't with us last weekend. Kaplan offers a free practice test, which you can find. It's one of the links that's pinned to the top of the chat. Or maybe top of the chat, and it says upcoming events. So you can use that to sign up for a free practice test. And all of our practice tests are structured the same way that the actual MCAT is. So you can like actually practice using the tools and everything as well as the questions. And so if you sign up for that, that way you can also practice with marking questions, reviewing them later on. So if you haven't taken that free practice test, definitely go ahead and do it. It's also a great way of figuring out your baseline. I 100% tell everyone that they should do it, even if they're just at the beginning of their prep, because you don't want to be the student that's like, oh, I'm just going to study review books over and over and over again, and I'm only going to take a practice test right before my exam, because that's like the worst thing you can do to yourself. And I will talk about that a bit more at the end, because I'm happy to share all the study tips. But before that, we are going to gas up our engines, and we're going to do a CARS passage, CARS being critical analysis and reasoning skills. So I'm going to give you guys about 2 minutes to read through and outline this page, and then there's another page with a couple more paragraphs that we're also going to read and outline. So go ahead and take those 2 minutes and read and outline, and I will see you when we're done. Alright, welcome back everyone. Okay, so what do you guys think about this one? Is this a fun passage? Is it making you laugh? Ha 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 ha. Just some MCAT pun humor for y'all. So we're gonna do the same thing that we did for our science passage where we're gonna outline. So I ask you again, how would you outline this? What would you put as your 3 to 5 words for paragraph 1? We have it's an interesting passage. I will tell you that this is like one of those passages I'd probably save for later just because it seems odd. And I am not a philosophy kind of person. But we're talking about those who consider the devil to be a partisan of evil, angels to be warriors for good, accept the demagogy of the angels, but things are more complicated. And so that's one of those things where you want to keep note. Anytime the author puts forward something and then says but or except or any kind of negatory, sure. Anything that negates what they said previously, that's something that should stand out to you. That could possibly even be worth a highlight, just so you know when the author is changing its tune. But we're told angels are partisans, not of good, but of divine creation. The devil, on the other hand, denies all rational meaning to the God's world. So what's going on in this passage, or this paragraph? How did you outline it? Because it's kind of all over the place. It's not really giving you, it's doing a hard job of telling you what's coming next, right? Like, we're talking about angels and demons. I don't know if we're going for a philosophy approach. I don't really know what's going on. So for me, this is kind of where I put angels versus demons, divine creation versus rational meaning. I know I told you guys you want to limit yourselves in terms of, oops, I don't know where that went. So angels versus demons. I know I said you want to limit yourself in terms of words, but sometimes it helps and it makes more sense to include a few more words. Cool. So then we move to paragraph 2, and we see world domination, as everyone knows, is divided between angels and demons, but the good of the world doesn't require the latter to gain precedence over the former. And so that's important, right? Because then the author puts forth a little piece of his own self. He talks about his interpretation, or his world. And so again, throw into the chat what you would put for this. And I'm going to figure out why my text boxes aren't sticking. But yeah, I totally agree for paragraph 1, angels, demons intro, angels, demons. Oh, and there are my text boxes. Cool. So for paragraph 2, anytime the author uses parentheses to give you their little insight into something, that should be that should be notable, because the author specifically wants you to know this about themselves versus what they're saying. And so we're saying that the good of the world doesn't require one to beat the other. It just needs equilibrium. So if there's too much meaning, then that's bad. If there's no meaning, that's bad. And so that gives us an idea of what's going on, right? That now takes whatever we were trying to figure out in paragraph 1, and it tells us this passage is about meaning in some way. So for paragraph 2, if we're breaking that down, yeah, and like Candace is saying, author's point of view is totally MCAT money. So yeah, I'd break this down into, let's see, I would say equilibrium is most important, and we're also talking about balance of meaning. Oops. Yep, for paragraph 2. And then paragraph 3. Things deprived of meaning, the place assigned to them make us laugh. So laughter is the province of the devil. It has malice, but beneficent relief as well. Cool. So what are we getting out of paragraph 3? What are we being told? Yeah, Annie, totally. That's also a great... I'm loving all of these because they're really breaking it down. It's definitely telling us where we would go If a question asks us about equilibrium of power, we're going to paragraph 2 for sure. So for paragraph 3, we're being told about the devil, right? We're being told about devil and laughter. So for me, that's sufficient. If I get a question about laughter and the devil, come in paragraph 3. Awesome. So now we're going to move on to the rest of the passage. And again, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to read and outline the rest of this. I know it's a little bit longer than the other one, but I have faith in you guys. So go ahead, take those 2 minutes, and I will see you back soon. Welcome back, everyone. So we got a lot more going on in this page than we had in the previous one. So again, go ahead, throw into the public chat, how would you outline paragraph 4? Ooh, Astrid, winning every time. She is like in there, she has all of them. This is great. But yeah, so we're talking about how first time an angel heard the devil's laughter, he was horrified. It was contagious, and the angel knew he had to act fast, so the angel started laughing. Yeah, and it had an opposite meaning. Totally, totally true. For sure, loving all of these. So paragraph 4, angel laughed too, opposite meaning. And like I'm writing down what I would write. Keep in mind that pretty much what you guys are saying is very, very accurate and very, very good as an outline. So I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just giving you another example of what an outline can be. So what about paragraph 5? There they stood, devil and angel, face to face, mouths open, both making more or less the same sound, each laughing in a different way. Devil laughed harder, angel laughed harder. Cool. Is there anything really changing in this paragraph? Because I think, like Astrid said, it's really continuation of 4, right? More laughter. Yay. Yeah, we're not really getting anything new out of this. We're not learning new information. We're just like, okay, cool. They kept laughing. Yay. Good for them. What about paragraph 6? Laughable laughter is cataclysmic, but the angel still gained something. They tricked us with their semantic hoax. Their imitation laughter and its original have the same name, so we don't realize that one and the same embrace two contradictory internal attitudes. There are two kinds of laughter. We don't have the words to distinguish them. So what's going on there? We kind of switched into a little bit, we switched back towards meaning a little, right? And so this is our author telling us that meaning is still important. I know I brought that up in paragraph 2. We kind of got off track, but we're going back because this is our conclusion. And so for paragraph 6, yeah, it's talking about how we can have the same word for contradictory things. One thing I love about the MCAT is I can misspell things on my outline all day long and no one will ever know. Although I think that's spelled right. Cool. So we have this passage outline. A few questions. What do you think about this passage? Were you into it? Were you like, yeah, this was entertaining? If I, was tired and I didn't feel like doing cars, I would have so paid attention the whole way through. Because if you are, mazel tov, that's awesome. I'm not that person. I would have zoned out. Like read Angel's Devil in the beginning, thought this was a passage on religion, like gotten to the end of it, been like, what did I just read? And yeah, probably just kind of not really remembered what was going on. Probably would have had to come back to this passage over and over again to answer the questions because I would not have remembered what's going on where. It is definitely on the more entertaining side of passages. Astrid, did it make you laugh? And if so, what was the meaning of that laughter? But yeah, it's definitely like there's a lot of words in it. There's a lot going on. And outlining is really, really helpful in terms of keeping track of all that, in terms of not zoning out midway through and at the end actually remembering what you read. And so the thing we do for cars passages that we don't do for science passages is also assign an author's purpose. So what do you guys think? What was the author's purpose in writing this passage? Dan Brown. That's funny. But in this case, I would say that our author's goal is to explain how laughter can have multiple meanings, right? Using the devil and the angel kind of as a proxy for that. So you always want to start your author's purpose statement with a verb, whether it's like to explain, to defend, to argue against, just because it gives you more insight into the author's goal. So when you get to that author's purpose question or that main idea question, you are already in the right headspace for it, because pretty much every cars passage has that question in some way. So to explain how meaning of laughter got twisted, something along those lines. Yeah, because what was the goal of the author writing this? Awesome. And I will say, I know passages can be really boring. Things that I do to help me pay more attention are like I'll use voices in my head. So I know I started reading paragraph 5 in kind of a funny way because in my mind I picture like the devil and the angel facing off, and so that was the voice that was happening in my head when I read it. But like, use voices if that helps you. Sometimes if it's a really science-heavy passage, I will pretend that my inner narrator is British because that amuses me and it makes me stay more focused. So whatever works at the end of the day, whatever gets you through that passage keeps you focused. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead, throw up a poll, pause, give you guys a chance to answer, and we'll talk in a sec. Okay, I'm actually really, really loving this. About 88% of you voted for A. So what that means in the Kaplan world is that you guys get a green star. Or in a Shwari world, you get a green star. Because that's awesome. That's really, really great. So what does the author's conception of laughter imply about language? That it is capable of concealing distinct meanings. It can't be deprived of all meaning. It's always precise and unambiguous. It's unnecessary for spiritual beings. So what do you guys think? Where do we learn about this? What paragraph would you go back to? Because the thing I'll say about cars, the thing that's different between cars and the science section is that you don't really have discretes. Everything that you answer in cars can be supported by the passage. So even if it's reasoning beyond the text, even if it's asking you to make an inference, the things leading you to that inference can be found in the text. And so you want to make sure that your information is coming from somewhere, that it's not in your head, because a common wrong answer type for cars is people reading through really, really fast and picking an answer choice that logically kind of makes sense, or like they might have read before and associated to this topic, but wasn't stated in the passage, and therefore it doesn't really work. Yeah. So our paragraph our paragraph 6 is where we learn about the author, and he makes his conclusion about what laughter is in terms of meaning. And the paragraph talks about how both the devil's laughter and the angel's laughter have different meanings. Sorry about that. And we're told that one word can have these contradictory meanings, and that is what our guiding thing should be. That is what we should be using for this question. So yeah, the answer choice A, language is capable of concealing distinct meanings, totally, because that applies to our meaning for the angel and our meaning for the devil. B, language cannot be suddenly deprived of all meaning. So in our case, we're giving laughter two meanings. So instead of taking away all the meanings, we're giving it multiple. So B is kind of an opposite scenario of what's actually going on. C, language is always precise and unambiguous. Well, like we talked about, if one word can mean two contradictory things, then that's completely untrue. And D, language is unnecessary for spiritual beings, just totally out of scope. Like, no, that is not what this passage was about. We were talking about laughter and meaning. And so with that, you guys chose answer choice A, and you guys did great. So let's move on to our next question. Go ahead and pull in. All right, awesome. Welcome back. So for this, we're being asked, in the context of the passage, which of the following forms of laughter is most similar to the devil's laughter? So again, best place we want to start here is, what paragraph are we going to learn about the devil's laughter? And so this is like the ideal place to look at your outline, right? Because we have that in our outline. We have that as, I believe, paragraph 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump back. We're going to figure out, what is the passage telling us about the devil's laughter? And we see, oh, sorry, did I choose the wrong paragraph? Yep, you guys are right. It was paragraph 3. So the devil's laughter, let's see, it had a certain malice to it. It turned out differently from the way they tried to seem, and had that relief that things are looser than they seemed. We have a greater latitude in living. Gravity does not oppress us. And then sure, we can even jump to 4, where we're talking about the devil's laughter versus the angel's laughter. And yeah, you see that the devil's laughter was contagious, etc. and so forth. So we have this information about the devil's laughter. Awesome. And that means that now when we go back to attack this question, we're not relying on information that we read a while ago. We're going right from the get-go. That information is fresh in our minds. Awesome, Bad Polo. I'm happy that cars is seeming fun. I think it's interesting. It's like Mackenzie saying, it's like a break for your brain where you don't have to think science. It's just like an open book test. Oops, pulled us to the wrong question. My bad. Oops. Anyway, so according to the passage, what is the devil's laughter really? What is the point of the devil's laughter? Was the devil laughing nervously in a tense situation? Did the devil's laughter have to do with taking things and twisting their meaning? Did the devil's laughter have anything to do with a task being complete or concealing its true intentions? I know most of you guys are choosing, let's see, most of you guys have pulled in B for this, and D is kind of our second runner-up. We're about 60% B, 30% D. Yeah, and so I understand the whole D is definitely, if you haven't gone back to the passage, can definitely seem like a good answer choice because we are talking about meaning. But in this case, when we jump back to paragraph 3, we looked at how the devil's laughter was humorous because it took a meaning and it changed it, right? It showed us that meanings were looser than we initially thought. And so in terms of the devil's laughter, laughing at a joke where the meaning of a word is twisted is most similar because it's taking something that was given a meaning and it's changing that meaning altogether. Does that make sense? So in this case, answer choice B would be our correct answer because we're not laughing to conceal one's true intentions. In the case of the devil's true intentions truly were to twist the meaning of this word, to increase the chaos, to make things seem less rigid. And so rather than concealing the devil's true intentions, it was really highlighting the devil's true intentions. There definitely is that value to going back to the passage, to going back to the relevant paragraph that has that information, and being able to pull from that. And again, using your outline is so important because that way, instead of reading through paragraphs 1 through 6, you're focusing in, you're honing in on paragraph 3 and going from there. Cool. So I'll give you another few seconds to go ahead and answer. Okay, so we have a lot of discord this time around. 42% of you guys are voting D, 28% of you guys are voting C, the other 28% of you guys are voting B. So let's talk about this. The first thing I want to point out to you guys is that this is a not question. Which of the following would the author most likely not agree? So a common way for people to miss this question is by picking something that the author would agree with as you're evaluating, because you forget what's asking. And so that was something I constantly got wrong until I caught that mistake, and I started using strategies to kind of avoid it. So the author isn't going to agree with one of these things. The author will agree with 3 of those things. That's something I would write to myself in my scratch paper, just because I know it's gonna be a thing. So the author will agree with 3 of these, just as a note to myself, because that makes me less likely to get it wrong. And Nas, thank you for sharing, honestly, that you polled and changed your answer. It's very, very common. You'll find that oftentimes your first answer is right. One of the things that I like about the Kaplan practice test too is that you can actually track it, so it shows you, like, at the end of the test whether you started out choosing the right answer and then switched to the wrong one, or you started out with the wrong one, switched to the right one. So if you're, like, very, very guilty of doing that commonly, it's a good way to identify that and, you know, come to terms with it. But if it's just like once in a way thing, then yeah, definitely go with your gut. It tends to be right. Cool. So the author is going to agree with 3 of these, won't agree with 1. This is one of those questions you probably say for last, because there's no way to predict an answer to this. You really just have to evaluate answer choice by answer choice. For the purpose of today, we're going to do it in order. So a balance must be struck in the world between rationality and irrationality. Would our author agree? And if so, what paragraph can we find the information supporting that our author would agree with it? L. So I think if we go back to paragraph, I believe it was 2, our author is saying that it's not so much about the devil being good or the angel being bad or one winning out over the other. It's about equilibrium. And so we would get rid of this answer choice. Yeah, like you guys are saying, we'd get rid of answer choice A because we'd go to paragraph 2. What about B? The devil serves an important function for the good of the world. Does the devil serve an important function for the good of the world? I mean, again, this throws us back to answer choice A and that balance, right? We know that we need balance, so if the devil wasn't there, we wouldn't have that balance. Ergo, yeah, sure, the devil does play that important function. We do need that discord to balance out the organization. C, laughter is the simultaneous expression of 2 contradictory attitudes. What do you guys think about that? So when the devil laughs, it has a certain meaning. When the angel laughs, it has a different meaning. And it's a contradictory meaning, sure. But when the devil laughs, is it ever expressing both of those attitudes simultaneously? I don't think so. I think when the devil laughs, it means a certain thing. And when the angel laughs, it means a different thing. So laughter, sure, is an expression of 2 contradictory attitudes. Yes, Allie, but it's not simultaneous. It's not the simultaneous expression, because you can't express both at the same time. That's the whole point of what the author is saying, right? That one thing can have such different meanings. So C is one of those things that we're probably going to go with, because the author would not agree with that. But just for completion's sake, we're going to talk through D as well. It's possible to laugh without having seen something deprived of meaning. That seems like something that the angel would agree with. That seems like something we'd find in paragraphs 4, paragraph 5 when we talk about angel laughter. So yeah, the author would totally agree with this, because this would be the opposite of the devil's laughter. And so again, knowing what paragraphs to go to, knowing where to find the information to support the wrong answer choices so that you can eliminate them, it's so, so important. It saves you time. And it also keeps you from getting lost in all the words, rather than trying to do it from memory. I would never, ever, ever recommend trying to answer all these questions from memory without ever referencing the passage again. I know we made it hard for you guys to reference the passage today, but given that you guys are giving me all this information from the outlines that I'm assuming you wrote down as we went through the passage, You guys are doing really, really well. And you guys are clearly getting to where we need to get. And Destiny, again, they're counting on that. That's another MCAT trick. They're counting on you to ignore the word simultaneous. They're counting on you to see laughter, expression of two contradictory attitudes, cross it out. So that's definitely a common mistake. And again, even on this question, you guys were split, and so I'm loving that you guys are understanding these answer choices now, and I'm loving that you are figuring out how to get to the right ones. Because at the end of the day, that's what's really important. Like, this is the time to make all of the mistakes. This is the time to misunderstand things or change your answers and figure all that stuff out. Because that means that come test day, you'll have worked all of this stuff out and you'll be ready to go. So perfect. Yeah, like Mackenzie says, she always highlighted the knot. I always wrote to myself, like, this is what the wrong answers will be, and I put little check boxes on my scratch paper so I'd check it off anytime I eliminated a wrong answer, because that helped me track it. It's really, really about what gets you the points. Because, yeah, sure, it takes 15 extra seconds, but 15 seconds for, like, one question right, it's a pretty good deal. Pretty sweet deal, in my opinion. Awesome. So we have our one last question. Make it count. Make this a green star question. I'm excited for us to end in a bang. Yeah, totally, Carrie. Or sorry, Katie. If you can't find something in the passage, it's probably not the answer. There are, like, the reasoning beyond the text, but again, if you can't find something that you can make that inference on, probably not the right answer. So go ahead and pull in. All right, y'all, we were real close. So we're at 70% for A, 17% for C, and like 6% for B and D, roughly. So which of the following is true about the relationship between laughter and meaning? Before we even jump into the answer choices, what do we know about laughter and meaning based on this passage? What have we learned from our passage? We know that the devil's laughter means something different from the angel's laughter. We know from our conclusion that it's possible for one word to have contradictory meanings, which we can then extrapolate to one word just has multiple meanings. We know that our devil's laughter meant something, and then the angel started laughing, and that added a meaning. So yeah, there's a lot that we know about laughter and meaning. And Catherine, that's totally fine. Frankly, it takes like multiple passages to get good at outlining, to figure out whether your outline's helpful. And one of the things I try to say was that you can totally summarize the paragraph, but the beauty of doing more and more CARS passages is that you get better at also kind of summarizing the stuff that's likely to be tested, or the type of stuff that's likely to be a keyword in a question, so that you know which paragraph to jump back to. So frankly, I'm happy you outlined. That's like step one. That's just like a great thing to do to start out with. And what you want to keep doing to start making a better outline, to start making your outline more specific, is just do more CARS passages. Keep outlining and keep giving yourself that personal feedback. Yeah, and like Kat says, if you're still able to go back quickly and find relevant info without reading the whole passage, still a win. Totally still a win. Yeah, hello, goodbye, hello. One thing can have multiple meanings, for sure. All right, so now that we have that established, let's jump into our answer choices. Laughter would not have come about if the meaning of everything was immutable. So if you know what immutable means, you know that means if unchangeable. So laughter would not have come about if the meaning of everything was unchangeable. Well, that's true, considering that we're talking about how our meanings kept changing based on laughter and based on who was expressing it. So we can definitely keep that in mind. B, without laughter, there's no way to contest the meaning of things. I mean, laughter is an example of how we can contest the meaning of things, but that doesn't make it the only way. We don't go around laughing at everything if we don't believe it has the right meaning, right? So that's kind of out of scope. It's taking the talk about how laughter has different meanings, and it's saying that without laughter we couldn't contest any meanings. Like, no, that's not what the passage said. We were just talking about the meaning of laughter specifically. So we go ahead and get rid of B. C, the word used to denote laughter itself has no meaning. Again, this, yeah, totally Astrid, it does seem a bit extreme as well. C, obviously that's not our problem, right? Our author is telling us how laughter has multiple meanings based on whether the angel's laughing or whether the devil's laughing. And so C is an opposite answer. Instead of having no meaning, the word used to denote laughter has multiple meanings. And then finally D, there are only two possible types of laughter that have meaning. We don't know about that. That's also kind of a throwback to Astrid. That's another extreme answer. We don't know if there are only two possible types of laughter. Sure, the author talked about two, but just because he didn't mention more doesn't mean there can't be more. We're already told how laughter has multiple meanings. So just because we're only discussing two of those doesn't mean that it can't have more. And so that brings us back to our correct answer choice A, where if we had not been able to change the meaning of things, laughter wouldn't have come about, because laughter came about as a way to twist the meaning of things and as an example of how one thing can have multiple meanings. So awesome job. I'm just going to give you guys all the stars, because green stars are the best. They're the best thing to see on a Saturday. Trust me, I'm a future doctor, as are all of you. And so with that, we're gonna move into more of our like Q&A discussion period. I know a bunch of you guys have been here for the past few events, so I'm gonna try to talk a little bit less about that stuff. But I do want to say that as you are studying, there are a couple of things you want to have in your arsenal of study tools. Because you want to be doing content review for sure. There's definitely stuff that like you probably studied freshman year that you haven't looked at since. Or if you're more of a non-traditional student, or you took a few gap years, just stuff that has kind of left the building. And so having content review is great. And oh yeah, like Kat is saying, take a moment and enter our drawing to win the $50 Amazon gift card if you haven't already. You can find that link at the top, and we'll be drawing for the winner in about 6 minutes. Yeah, 6 minutes. Awesome. So you want to have content review, but you also want to have practice. And when I say practice, I mean both full lengths, because taking a 7-hour test is hard in the sense that running a marathon is hard. And if you've never run 26 miles before, it's going to be a shock to your body if you then just try to run 26 miles. And similarly, if you haven't sat down and had to focus for 7 hours in front of a computer screen before, it's going to be a shock doing that for the first time. You don't want test day to be the first time you're taking that full length. And so I generally tell my students you want to take at least 4 or 5 full lengths, because usually full length 1 is just like the shock to your system of, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? Full length 2 is like you've started studying, but you're still nervous. You're still kind of concerned about what's going on, and you're just starting to use your strategies. Like for most of the Kaplan students, that's when they're just starting to outline. They've learned how to predict, but it's still not like a muscle memory-esque skill yet. And so usually most people don't see very many point changes between full length 2 and full length 1. And that's not because they're not learning, but it's because you're not missing the things you were missing the first time around anymore. You're missing new things. So it's a great way to see how you've grown, but also see your areas of improvement. And kind of same thing with full length 3. So full length 4 is usually where most students see improvements because they're used to the 7-hour length. They're used to outlining, like they're old pros at this point. And I say that because it's good to set that expectation for yourself to know, like, okay, if my score doesn't go up the first few times, it's not because I'm doing a bad job of studying. It's not because I'm a bad student. It's because this is normal. And like Candace is saying, they're a good way of checking in on what you need to work on. But you're not going to sit down and take a full length every day. But you should be doing practice problems, if not every day, like at least every other day, or every day that you sit down to study. Because like we just did, it's different learning content versus applying it to practice problems. And it's different seeing a practice problem and like seeing the length and complexity of the question stem and then developing that skill of breaking it down so that you can use your content. So like you really want to have that as part of your prep every day, even from day 1. Even if you're like, I don't know content, you still want to be doing practice problems to develop your strategic guessing skills, to see what you actually know. And Katie, I'm happy it was helpful. Thank you for joining us. They really are. I like personally took a Kaplan class, which is why I'm here talking about Kaplan classes. And I really think that's what got me through my MCAT. Abbreviations for all the tests. Frankly, Bad Polo, I'm not sure what the other tests are. So I would love to help, but I don't know what they are. Yeah, because I don't believe AMC does board exams, but I could be wrong. No, because that's USMLE. So as far as I know, they only offer the MCAT. I could be wrong. I'm not sure. But yeah, so in general, as you're prepping, like your goal should be to start off your day with, like if you've taken a practice test, you want to go through that practice test, figure out what content you need to review on, what skills and strategies you need improvement on, and then do your content review based on that, and then do questions based on your content review to make sure that whatever you just reviewed is really, really sticking with you. Because that's the most important part, right? Like you can go and reread the chapter on transcription, translation over and over and over again. But if you keep missing those questions when it comes down to it on your practice test day, then that's not really helpful. So doing questions is a good way to make sure that what you're supposed to be learning is what's actually sticking in your brain. Yeah, sure. LOR, maybe an acronym that stands for letter of recommendation. And Ash, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being so participatory. That was great. And Annie, yes, I do. I have lots of advice. So application-wise, for those of us who have a lower GPA, besides RAC the MCAT. So like Candace is saying, a good letter of recommendation makes a really big difference. Because again, your GPA and your MCAT score get you in the door. So like a lot of schools have we don't really consider people under this MCAT score. We don't consider people under this GPA. So like to get on the pile of considered applications, you kind of need that higher MCAT score. But then once you're on the desk, once they're reading your application, it really comes down to personal statement. It really comes down to letters of recommendation. It really comes down to how you're presenting yourself. And so having letters of recommendation that really highlight who you are rather than just being vague is important. So I recommend reaching out to your recommenders like 3 months in advance just to make sure that they will write you a letter. I personally sent mine like a resume, and I sent them a summary of what I wanted them to talk about with respect to me, because I asked all of my recommenders to highlight different aspects of my personality, because I figured that way they're not getting the same letter over and over again. And then your essays, I see a lot of people write essays that aren't personalized. So make sure that your essay isn't something that like your best friend could take, write her name on, and submit, and it would apply to her as well. Because that is such a strong, strong place for you to show who you are as a person. Because every med school knows you want to be a doctor. You wouldn't be applying if you didn't. And so their question is like, what about you makes you a unique person? And I'll say, like, for me, I talked a lot about how teaching was important to me and how I wanted to be an anesthesiologist because it seemed like a job where you have people who are kind of panicked and you're like the last person they see before they go under. So having someone who's calming, who can answer questions, who's good at interfacing with people seems like a really good skill that I've spent a lot of time developing. So that was really the main theme of mine. I had a friend who was an astrophysicist. She wrote about Mars. She really liked Mars. And she wrote about how the research she had done with respect to Mars made her very, very good as a candidate, how like the time and dedication she put into it and her passion for it would translate into medicine. It's really about things like that. Making yourself stand out, making yourself or differentiating yourself from the rest of the pack. It's really not about being like, I want to be a doctor because it's what I've always wanted to do. And being a doctor is amazing, and I think I'd be a great doctor. Like, that's kind of what you want to steer away from. And you want to steer towards the whole, when I was shadowing, this event happened, and it made me think this, and this is why I want to be in medicine, and this specific form of medicine, or whatever. Anything that introduces them to you. So I know that was kind of a rant, but I hope that helps. I've seen a lot of applications like that where they're not specific, and you really want to be as specific to you as possible. Because again, that's where they're drawing interview questions from, and so you want to give them, you want to be an open book. You don't want the interview to be the first time that they learn about the fact that you, I don't know, invented a cool blood sorting machine for cancer. I don't know. That should be in your personal statement because that's cool. Awesome. So with that in mind, again, I'm just going to talk about, I'm just going to keep this up here in terms of resources you want to have access to. I'll personally say that I took a live online Kaplan class. When I started prepping, freaked out because there just seemed to be so many different books and review videos and just everything, and I didn't know where to start. And so I loved Kaplan for that because it gave me everything I needed, and it told me when I needed to be doing everything that I needed to be doing, so it took all the guesswork out of it. So instead of like sitting in the library for 10 minutes staring at my books wondering what to start studying, I would actually be using those 10 minutes to study or do a passage. So I'm a big fan of Kaplan. I obviously came back to teach for Kaplan after I got into med school. And I think as well as the resources, the teachers are just phenomenal, phenomenal people as well. And yeah, like Candace said, you can find that information on the AMC website as well. But you get 5,300 characters. So drum roll, please. I'm going to drum roll on my computer. The person who has been selected in our drawing today is Hunter Hacker. So Hunter, you'll be getting an email soon. I also really love your name. I kind of question, like, were those the two professions that your parents wanted you to go into? And I think that's a really cool name. So congratulations, Hunter Hacker, and thank you for joining us today. And we'll be in touch soon. And I'll stick around if you guys have any questions again. I went through the process of applying fairly recently, so I'm happy to share any insights that I can, / answer any questions you might have. But yeah, and the other thing I'm going to talk about, just because I'm a big fan of it and I'm going to be teaching at it, so it's kind of near and dear to my heart, are our intensive programs. So I see a question that says, can I get full-length exams without buying the full prep course? So you can't get all of them, Maria, but you can buy 3. And we can definitely throw the link for that in, but that's like under our practice pack section on our website. Oh, Katie, great question. I apologize for not mentioning that sooner. So most students spend about 300 to 350 hours prepping for the MCAT. I'll say that I'm pretty sure I fell within that range, given that I took about 6 practice tests and I reviewed all of them and I did the classes and all the pre-class work and post-class work, but that's pretty normal. And so most students split that over 3 months. The best way to figure out how long it should take you is identify how many hours per week you have to spend on studying and then divide 300 by that, and that should give you a good idea of how many weeks you'll need to dedicate. Yeah, and like Mackenzie said, Kimmy, you get one personal statement, and then each school will send you a secondary application, which is more like school specific. So why do you want to come to our school? Or tell us about a time when, etc. and so forth. Allie, it's definitely not preferred, right? Like you want, ideally in a perfect world, you want to take the MCAT once and be done with it. If you are taking it twice, it won't weaken your application if you show significant improvement the second time around. Because then it's like a low GPA, right? If you say, okay, my GPA is low, I have this killer MCAT score, it's very similar to, okay, I took the MCAT the first time, I wasn't ready for it, I didn't prep, but then I really buckled down, I did the work, and look at this, I went up 20 percentiles. So if your score jumps a lot, then it's not really a weakness, because then you're able to show that given more time, given the right resources, I made the correct changes, and yeah, my score reflects that. Cassie, it's not super common to take it more than once, or it might be, I'm not sure. I honestly can't say. I don't know how many of my students do take it or don't take it. I'm again not trying to contradict Candace, and I don't think Candace is trying to contradict me. It's just not information I have a lot of data on. And I think a better question might be to ask whether is it common for people who get into med school to take the MCAT more than once? And for that, I would answer no. There definitely are a lot of people taking the MCAT multiple times, but like we said in the beginning, only 40% of applicants actually get into med school. And so out of those, most people are not, unless they are really in the boat of like, I scored really low and now I'm scoring really well on practice tests, so it's time to retake. Or if they did the whole, like, I took the pre-2015 MCAT and now I have to take the new MCAT. So if you are in that boat, if you took the old MCAT, and now you're coming back to apply and you're retesting, like that won't reflect poorly on you because you are being forced to take the new MCAT. Yeah, totally. And they do see all MCAT scores from the last 5 years. It depends on, it like varies school to school how they interpret that information. So some schools do average your newest score or your highest score versus your like other scores. Other schools just look at the highest score. So again, that's good information to gather about the schools you're interested in if you are retesting, to keep in mind. So if you guys have any other questions, I will stick around. I do want to talk about the intensive program. Like I said, it's kind of my baby. I'm going to be teaching at one in San Diego. So the intensive program is kind of like MCAT Bootcamp to the extreme, because you are doing MCAT from start of day to end of day every day for 6 weeks. And it's literally the most comprehensive prep you can get. If you have 6 weeks to dedicate to prepping, this is probably the best thing you can do, because you are learning content, you're doing content review, you're doing strategy review, you are working one-on-one with a tutor, you are working with people to go through passages specifically to really hone your outlining skills, your prediction skills, your passage approach skills, and again, you're doing your higher score content review as well, but in MCAT-like contexts. So it's the ideal, personally, prep program. So we have it both online and in person. I think the online one is currently registering now. I actually don't know off the top of my head, B. Sharma, but I'm sure that we can get that information for you. But it's just like an amazing program. I taught at one that we had in Boston a couple years ago, and like over the past 2 years, all of my students have messaged in to tell me, like, one wanted to go to Drexel, that was his dream school, and he got in. One of them got a 99th percentile score on the MCAT, which was just insane. So it just like it's a great program altogether. I've never had a student who hasn't improved. All of my students that year got into med school, which is exciting. And so I'll be teaching at the San Diego one this summer. So if any of you guys are interested, come hang out, come visit, and we can be friends. We can be MCAT buddies. So with that, I will leave you guys unless you have more questions. But I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you guys for just being a great class altogether, for participating, because especially for a live online class, it can be really, really easy to get distracted with other things. And the way that you're going to get the most out of it is by participating, answering questions, etc., and so forth. So thank you for just doing a great job, for really making this a great experience for me, for your fellow students, and I hope that I will see you guys soon in a class or in another event, or maybe even in San Diego. So I hope you guys have a great Saturday and happy studying.